Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Wednesday. It's first day of August, so we're starting a new month. But this will be our chart lesson for the day, and it really, other than this big move down, there wasn't a lot happening today, and there's not a lot of entries on it. And then that took us kind of into the 1 o'clock hour, which you got to be careful. And that really lasted. I would say that was still going on even through here, so you might push this even over a little further. If you'd had a big bullish bar right here or a nice bullish bar, you might take that one. I mean, that one's almost bullish on my chart, but if you had a good bullish one, you might take that just because this is a trading range. We're probably going to snap back at least to test that or back into the EMA, even if we're going to go lower. But you'll probably come back to the highs like it did. It just kept going. So you might have a little better setup. I'm not crazy about that. It's still part of this, but it's still part of this 1 o'clock FOMC move. You can see where it got volatile there. But the price action usually plays out, and it was starting to slow down here. So you might take that trade. Otherwise, you don't get a chance to get in till here, really. So, um, and if you had a nice bullish bar up here, you might have considered a short coming back as well, but you just don't get it. So, but anyway, there's not a lot of trades today. We'll talk about the ones we do see here, and we'll wrap up the day. I mean, we started off really, really slow here. I mean, there's just not really many entries here. This was a possibility, but it was just a first entry, and it's a little two pushes up, but you're not that far away from the EMA, and you never know if you're going to get that second leg up. We end up just going sideways, so I don't think it was worth risking. But let's talk about. Let me back out a little more where you can see it a little better, and we'll talk about the trades. There's a reversal pattern here. I notice we're just kind of going sideways, and we got two legs down, and then we pull back. There's your first entry, and then you pull back, and there's a second entry. Or actually, you move up. There's your first entry short, and then the second entry short right there, and it bounces. It confirms that trend line, bounces right off of it. I like going long there, and that turns out to be pretty nice move, but that takes us right into this sideways stuff. Uh, we do pull back here and get your first break, and you get a second entry long right off the EMA, and it's a little breakout pullback to test this breakout area. Nice bullish bar. It actually went lower and turned and went out the other side, but you can just wait for this to close. If you waited for this to close on my chart, you may not have got in because it just gaps over and keeps going. So on my chart, the better entry was if you already had a buy stop in case it went short. It went out the little side first and turns and goes up, so you'd be better off to go long right there. But if you didn't have that on your chart, you can put a buy stop here. And if you skipped over, you could put a buy limit. I would only buy it, let it work. I would only let me enter if it was on this same bar. I don't think I would let it go way up here and come back and fill you, even though it probably still would have worked. I don't think it would be worth risking. So I wouldn't risk that. But after that, we just kind of go into this sideways action. There's a lower high here, but it's too bullish, and you notice how you just kind of get stuck in here, and you don't have enough room to get out before here going long. You don't have enough room to get out before the lows before going short. It finally bounces here. It pushes up, pulls back, gives you a first entry short, and there's a nice bullish bar on this breakout, but I don't think I'm going to risk that. Not on the first entry short, not back to the EMA. It does kind of confirm that trend line. If you want to be a little risky, you might go long right there, but I don't think it's worth risking. Of course, it works, but you don't know that prior, so you need to kind of wait. You get a failed second entry short here, but now you've had this breakout and you've gone at least a measured move. You want to measure this like so. So you're looking for a measured move, and you've already got that. Really, you don't have much room there, so it's a little bit risky. And then you might measure this move. I'd measure it from here and from here, but we'll just go with this one. and that would have given you a little more room, but you see we never got there. So I think your better move was the sideways pattern, looking for that. It went a little higher than that, but I don't think you want to be going long right here, right into that when it was kind of held and push up and then pull back. So I just think you're better off to sit tight and wait and see, and then you make that little push up. Um, and you get a lower high right here with a big bearish bar, and it closes just right there at the EMA. That's probably worth taking to ride back to here, and maybe it comes back to here. In this case, it just keeps on going, but that would have been my first couple of targets. And then my next one would have been down here, but even then, it just keeps going. So this turns out to be the trade of the day. It's a little aggressive. This was the better entry on your failed second entry long here. It comes off the EMA, and you can see, it may be a little hard to see. You can never click the line you want to click. I'm going to make that a little darker so you can see it. There's a shorter term trend line right there as well. You can see it there, and that's right off of it. All these really confirm it. I like going big bearish bar, went higher and turned. So I like going short right there. And so if you caught either one of those, you can ride this down. We actually come back right here and turn down off of it again and get it's just a first entry, but this has been a pretty strong downtrend. And it's right off the that key entry point there. And then of course you get one more move, and you actually get a close outside here, and this breaks higher and turns down and gives you a second. When it broke below right there, it's a second entry short. You could even wait on this and go short right there at that key entry point, and that's another nice move down. And then of course we bounce here, but that takes you, by the time you get this failed second entry short, it looks like a repeat pattern here, but it's already into the 12 o'clock hour right there. And so I don't, you don't want to risk that. Plus it's into a double top, and you just would have got hung up there. It's just not worth taking. A lot of times right before, from about 12 o'clock into a 1 o'clock FOMC announcement, it might just go sideways like that for the whole hour. Here, it didn't even hardly make any, everybody just quit trading right there. That whole hour, basically, nothing's happening until 1 o'clock. And then, so you want to stay out there. We talked about this trade. You might take that. It's a little risky. It's not very bullish. It's more bullish than bearish, but it's very close to just being a neutral bar. It is a second entry. Notice the new high, and you come down first entry and then second entry. But it's just not a very good entry. But if you want to be aggressive, it would have been a nice trade, but you're being really aggressive. And then notice it pushes up, first entry, then it pushes through, pulls back. And really the second entry triggered there, but that's right back into that high. But when it comes down here and bounces again and gives you a second entry, that's still part of that move down. So I think you could still go long there, even though it's not a great signal bar. If you really want to take a trade that late in the day, because we're probably going to push on out of here and take, it's like a little breakout pullback on the second entry, plus it's a failed second entry short there. It actually moves more than a point or so, so technically by the rules it's not a failed second entry short, but it looks like the pattern we look for. It's close enough. And so that was really the only trades I saw I liked today. Most of the time you just kind of had to sit on your hands here. And there's a few trades coming down, and then you had to just sit on your hands here, and that pretty much finished the day. So there just wasn't a lot happening. I appreciate the emails I got yesterday. I got quite a few emails and some comments, and I appreciate those positive comments based on some of my little soapbox rant yesterday. But a couple of people asked me if I would show more about how I use these trend lines, and generally just to show you a couple of things here that will help. Generally you start off the low or the high. You don't start where the close is where you start, and you go through the next swing, and generally you use the closes on the next swing. You can kind of see how I use the closes there, and that one's working down, and you get a break and a new low. And then I started at the low, went through the closes. There's your confirmation, there's your break and your new high. And another way to know if you've got your trend line right is to copy it and drag it over, and it should fit neatly. See how neatly this fits? Every time it touched that line, it turned down. Touch that line, it turns down. So you can see prices fit neatly in there. If you put your trend line on here and just say this one up here looks like that, it's not fitting neatly in there. Even though you might make that look right over here, does it look right there? No. So it tells you there's something wrong. Um, so that's how I verify, to make sure I'm getting it right. And you can see that fits in there pretty well. We turn down right off those highs. We turn down right off those highs. And you can see it rejecting prices on both sides. So that's one way you can tell if your line is correct or not. Same thing here. Look how prices fit neatly in there. If you drop this thing down here and this looks like this, then you copy this one, put it over here, and it looks like that. That's not really fitting there. You actually could probably argue for that one though. It's probably not a good example, and you still get a close outside and a couple of swings up, and it reverses because it does touch there. But notice how we're completely outside here, and we're still working higher. Um, that one's probably not a good example. You could probably argue for that being correct. But just to show you how I drew this one, I drew it off the top right through that first close. Notice how it's fitting there, and you kind of get a close outside. It's trying to make a new low, and it can't. We're just really going sideways there. Same thing here. I've got the short-term one, but notice how we just keep going. So you figure there's got to be something else there. So I draw it off those two, and it's coming right through there. It ends up touching there. We broke here, made the new low, and then we pulled out of there. But notice on this side how all that's fitting down through there. Every time we touch this low, it pretty much turns up. Maybe this one probably needs to be a little bit closer there. And another thing, when you draw, like when we take this one and we draw it over here, notice this swing, it usually will work off of this swing right here. Just like this one, it's kind of working off the lows of that swing. Sometimes it'll fit better than others. I'll see if I can maybe see if I see another couple of examples here. But here, this one, notice how on this side we're working off those closes. See how it works off that last swing right there? That's usually a good sign. When it goes through gaps where it gaps over, I don't see any of those today really. But when it gaps over, that's usually a good sign your line's in the right way. This is probably one here. Somehow I moved that line. But notice how it gapped over that midline kind of there. I'm having a hard time getting that one. But you can see how it gapped right there. That's probably a good sign that your midline, if it gaps over. But generally it tends to gap over the trend line or the trend channel lines. And you can see how it worked off that swing. So that's another clue. But the big clue is, does it fit on both sides, and is it holding prices neatly? And when it's not, people send me their trend line, like look at this trend line working up here, how neatly that fits off that side, off this side. I haven't even looked, but I bet you I can make a midline fit right in there. And there it is. Notice how it's working off that midline, and look where that swing works. It comes right off inside that swing right there. And you can see that's clearly a two-tiered channel working up. But notice how neatly that fits. If you come out here and you draw this trend line and it's doing something like this, and you draw it over here, it just doesn't fit that neatly. And you can see it doesn't catch anything on this side. But that's just, you probably wouldn't draw it that way to begin with, but that's just, I'm trying to show you an example. It's hard not to draw them right when you know how to draw them, because I can glance at this chart. I've done this so long, I have so many hours at this screen, I can glance at these charts. I don't even have to draw the lines anymore. I know where they're at. I can see them almost instantly. Here's one right here. You can see that. You don't need to draw a line to see that when you've done this long enough. And it's right off the first few bars. A lot of times if you get a few bars stacking up, that's going to set your trend line right there. And notice how it comes, and people will say you can't do this after the fact. Well, if you saw that right there, that's what you would have seen in real time. It's easy to draw that line. And then notice how it comes right back into play down here. People say you can't do that. That's what gets me. And if you copy this one, let's just see how we can make it fit on the other side. I believe it's really coming down through right there, and then you get an overshoot and it reverses. But you can see how it's turning prices on both sides there till you get an overshoot. And again, it's probably two-tiered. And there it is. Perfect. And notice how it's catching in that swing right there on this one. And you'll see that a lot. Just like this one's catching on that swing right there. This line's working off that swing. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful. Since we had a few minutes, I thought I'd show that. But generally, just remember there's a couple of rules. If you use them 90% of the time, you'll get your trend right. Start with the high, not the closes, the high of the swing or the low of the swing. High of the swing, low of the swing. Start with those highs and lows, and generally you'll work off your first couple of swings. Like right here, there's probably a short-term one right there off those first couple, and you can see that catching that trend right up through there. But there's a bigger one there as well, which is this one. And so that's really, I would really call this your first two swings right here. And you catch it right off those closes. And notice how when it broke through, it came back and tested it took that second leg down. Same thing here. I started off those first few bars, went through that first swing, and look how it catches it the rest of the way up. Even though there's not much of a trend here, you could do the same thing right there. Catches it right there. Look how it's closing under there. It catches on that first swing. Then you get a break, move to a new low, and it tries to reverse. In fact, it does reverse. I already showed you that one. There's one off the first couple of swings. Look how it's catching it all the way up until you get a close, move to a new high, and now it's going down. Or really more sideways, but it's still working lower. Same thing here. You start off that low, go through that first swing, closes, and there's your trend line working up. You look at a little close, move, and it turns down. So just remember those few little rules, and that will get you in the right place 90% of the time. There's some other stuff like spiking channels and things like that, but as you get more experience, you'll get better at that. But generally, if you start with that high and work off those closes of the first swing, or start at the low and work off the closes of the first swing, you're going to get it right 90% of the time. And occasionally you might have to adjust, but generally you can get it pretty close. And like this one, you may not have known, you didn't really have a whole lot of, let me make this bigger. Let me show this, then I'm going to wrap it up. But right here, you didn't have a whole lot to work with on this, but it was clearly bouncing off these right here. And so if you just drew it along those and copied it and drug it over to here where it fit the best, you would have had it by the time it came back on these two swings. And it would have helped you with it. Again, that's not a great example of one because it didn't come back into play till way down here, but I can show you some of them where you can quickly find it on one side and then turn around and find it on the opposite side. Instead of finding the trend line, you kind of find it on the opposite side. See if I can see one here. Here's one. It's not real clear whether you should be going this way or this way, but it's really clear off the highs here. So look at that. You draw that, and you could have had that after a few swings here. Drop it down to here, and there's your trend, and you get your break, new high. So that's a good example of one that it's easier to find it off those highs than it really is off the lows here, because it's doing a lot of sideways stuff, and it's not coming back this way very much. But you can see that's clear right there of that line. That's easy to find. Just copy it and drag it down, and look how it fits in there. Plays out perfect. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. This is Matt with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.